way too long. Just reminding you, the new disclosures starts, so really when we open for business Monday, any new loans that are going in there as real deals will fall under the new disclosure guidelines. And I know you've all heard all about it. Just know you're going to be dealing with some other agents out there on the other side that haven't heard as much as you have. So you may have to educate them when it comes to timing for closings. We're saying don't try to close in less than, say, 35 to 40 days, at least starting out. And we may find after a few months that we're fine going back to the 28-day or 30-day close. But because it's so new, I just think I would try over the next few months, at least, until January, to try to make sure that you allow enough time for us to see how well this all works with getting the disclosures out and getting everything from all the parties that we need so we can do our jobs. And with that being said, I just want to remind you, we're going to be more closely scrutinized on our loan estimates that we send out to the buyers. And we have got to have up front more information on those community association disclosures. If you're working with a buyer, really put pressure on the listing agent to get you the information. If it's your listing, do as much as you can to have that information available, because we're now required to put in the HOA initiation fee and the monthly dues, and if there's a transfer letter or whatever, we're supposed to do our best to know those fees and to have them in there. I'm also going to talk to Campbell and Brannon and see what we can do to possibly get them to order those clearance letters earlier so that the buyer is not going to have to pay an extra $150 for a rush fee that is often the case, because they're just getting those the last week of closing. And I know they want to wait and make sure the information's accurate, but it puts us all in a crunch a bit. Yes?
I can't remember if you've already said this or not, but how many days do you recommend that we put in our financing and appraisal contingency?
I would really I'd try to go with 25 days, pretty much what we've done before. Really, the only difference in the early part of the process is that I can't require documentation until I've sent them all their disclosures. We've had a little bit of clarification on that in the last week, and we have been told that if someone says, "What are you going to need from me?" we're allowed to tell them. But we just can't say anything that implies that we require it before we send those out. So that's the only reason, till we see how it goes and how willing people are to send it in without getting, pushed too hard. I feel like we're still okay with 25 days on the financing piece. I'm just saying 35 to 40 days on the closing, because even though we'll have their loan approved, depending on how late in the process we get some of these final numbers from third parties that we have to do the closing disclosure. That's why I'm saying let's allow some extra time there on the end for that. So yeah, we're going to work on seeing if we can get them to order those earlier in the process, but the sooner we have the information to do the loan estimate, then the better we are up front. Talking about home warranties, a lot of times those aren't ordered till a day or two before closing, and that information has to be on the closing disclosure. So if you can do that earlier in the process, if it's in the contract, there's going to be a home warranty, any of those items you can do a little bit earlier in the process, so when we prepare the closing disclosure, it's accurate. Those of you that have been to the class know that's not one of the items that triggers the new disclosures where there's a 3-day wait, because it doesn't affect their APR or their loan product or interest rate, any of that. But it does require us to have to redo it and send it out again. And they're allowed to wait a day to review it before closing if they wish to. The buyer has that right. So if we can avoid some of that, last minute and redoing, and just think about it, if we have that happening on every closing package where we're having to redo everything a time or two, it really, kind of gets us bogged down in the closing department. And by us, I mean with all lenders. If we have to do disclosures multiple times, that all does take time. And I know I've said this before, even before TRID, but anytime there's any changes to the contract, whether it's difference in the purchase price, changing the seller paid closing costs, just communicate that as early as you can, just so we can get the changes made that we need to, because we do have to get the appraisal updated, get title work updated. There's just several things we have to do in the process before we can send out the closing disclosure. So earlier is better on that. Any questions? well, I'll end on a little bit more positive note. I know everyone's so tired of this topic. Home Services Lending we'll be having our first birthday on October 1st. As far as being a correspondent lender and no longer being, the Wells Fargo joint venture. So next Tuesday, I'm going to have breakfast brought in. We're going to have birthday cake, and I'll have some statistics on how we've done the first year. So I hope you all can make it. All right, thank you.